Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Can You Hear Me podcast. We're grateful that you joined us. I'm Rob Johnson of Rob Johnson Communications.
And I'm Eileen Rochford, CEO of the marketing and strategy firm, The Harbinger Group. Here on the Can You Hear Me podcast, we focus on how communications impacts major world and organizational issues, CEO communications, everything from branding, signaling, and leading, and how all of these can reinforce trust and authenticity when handled properly.
That's right. Today's topic is geared toward those who have really struggled to adapt to the fast-changing world since the pandemic began. You started working from home. Many times your family was quarantined right there with you, with nowhere to go. Even though you weren't commuting anymore, saving time on that end, you had more time to get things done. But many times that meant bosses stacking your day with even more meetings and having to keep your head above water mentally. Many businesses struggled to survive, requiring deep staff cuts and more work hours for those who remained. We've all endured a prolonged state of crisis for 18 months, and it's taken a significant toll on us mentally and physically.
And mental health should be at the top of the list when it comes to resetting, prioritizing, and organizing your new normal world right now. It's definitely a high priority for me and for my team at the Harbinger Group. And I really wanted to discuss this topic of what I keep referring to as overwhelm and general anxiety for a few reasons today. So one, we're beginning to do significantly more in-person meetings. I don't know if you're experiencing the same level, Rob, but
indeed,
we are at in-person meetings. We're traveling to in-person meetings and all that goes along with that. We're doing a lot of on-site working as well with clients. And I know lots of other people are too. We're also going to networking events. So the days are longer. All of that adds up. And I've noticed lots of folks are talking about kind of the effects of that. And they're recognizing that they're finding the reentry to be both exhilarating and draining. And that seems like normal, right? You would imagine that would be the case if you'd been kind of out of circulation for so long. That's normal. But to me, it felt like something as business leaders, we should start talking about and examining kind of the implications for us as we get closer and closer to not having, these constraints that arose due to the pandemic anymore. And we settle into this new normal, right? So there's just a lot of impact on people.
And I think the other thing too is by talking about it, Eileen, you realize that there are other people dealing with it. I mean, obviously we know that people are dealing with it, but it helps when you're talking to people, and we'll get into that a little bit later, about just shared experience. Oh, you're feeling that too. And I think that that's really important to do.
Absolutely. The other reason I was super excited to tackle this topic today is, I've got a personal connection. I've personally been dealing with ongoing feelings of overwhelm myself. And it's like I've been in this perseveration loop of worry, coupled with just struggling to do everything, and then capped off with being quick to fatigue. All of these things are foreign. This is not how I operate. It's not normal. But I just want to be clear. This is not depression. I haven't felt depressed. I haven't had any anxiety attacks. And I know so many people close to me who struggle with those symptoms, and they suffer so greatly. My heart totally goes out to them. That's really not how I felt. It's not been to that degree of severity. It's rather, it's like this lingering overwhelm has impacted me in smaller ways. So I've struggled with sleeping. Staying asleep is my issue. I can fall asleep because, like I said, I'm quick
exhausted. Yeah.
But I can't stay asleep. I can't stay asleep more than like 3 or 4 hours typically. And just generally this overall decline in well-being. And I was struggling with that for months over much of this year, actually. So as somebody, my identity is really rooted in being energetic and highly productive. So this was an extraordinarily frustrating time. I just think it's important that we all be honest about that. Everyone is being impacted in different ways. And that's my kind of, examples of impact. But in the last 2 months, things are really on the upswing. And I've been using some specific approaches consistently, and they have started to take hold and work. So
do you want to share any of those with us?
In our discussion, I will absolutely talk about them. You bet I will. But just this big picture, like my personal situation, what I'm hearing from folks who work with us, our clients, my friends, lots of executives, it's all got me thinking about how everyone else is feeling and how leaders and executives are likely experiencing just very similar struggles, and employees everywhere. They're talking about how hard everything feels. So that's why we land on the topic. We just need to discuss how leaders need a reset. And they also need to recognize that their employees and their colleagues, they need a reset. They need to be given the grace and space to do it. Plus, I think we need to talk about tools that can help us all make these shifts in order to get back on track. And like you said, Rob, my personal hope is just by talking about it, getting it out there, we can encourage particularly leaders to model that this reset is needed, how to do it, and set that example that their people can take that time and space to do it.
No, I think these are all very important things to talk about, Eileen. And I love it that you're willing to share this because it is a huge issue. And I would say that the sleep piece for me has been the one thing where it's manifested itself. Like I go to bed. I used to work nights in the TV business. Now I don't. And, by like 10 o'clock, I'm like, man, I am exhausted. And I can go to bed in 10 seconds. And then about 3, 4 in the morning, some mornings, not all of them. And my mind just starts racing. I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do this. Do I get up and do I go to my office? Do I start knocking this out? Then do I take a nap from 6 to 8? Whatever. Like I think about these things. And one of the great things about the weekend is I can say on a Friday night, I can go to bed and I can sleep pretty soundly because I'm like, okay, I know generally Saturdays, I don't have to deal with some of these pressing issues that are right in front of me. So I can relate from that standpoint. And I think it's very important to talk about, and it's frustrating. And whenever I have a good night's sleep, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have a great day. And even when I don't have a good night's sleep, I'm like, okay, I'll have to mix in a little bit more meditation because I do that on a frequent basis. And that helps me clear my head and give me the refocus that I need as well. So before we dive deeper into this topic, we also want to set a couple of parameters for assisting you with the COVID anxiety if you're indeed dealing with it. If you listen to us, you know that we like to highlight various reference materials. And these 6 tips for dealing with COVID anxiety come from a recent piece on NPR. They may seem basic, but they are a good start. It's sort of a baseline here for this discussion. First off, you need to reframe how you think of anxiety. In other words, instead of approaching anxiety as a negative emotion that must be suppressed, we should think of it as a superpower that motivates us to act. I know it's a different way of thinking about it, and people are like, anxiety, why would I ever think about it in those terms? Well, think about how you're shifting, how you're the whole context of it. And then you need to calm yourself with breathing exercises. Inhale and exhale every 4 seconds. I don't know if you see athletes do that from time to time when they're on the field or if they're on the golf course or on wherever they are. And you see these people like close their eyes and take the deep breaths. And it's not something that's going to reinvent you necessarily, but it helps to recenter you a little bit and it helps to calm you down because being calm is good. That doesn't mean no energy. Then you need to move your body. We're talking about exercise, and people say, oh gosh, exercise. I don't have time to do that because I've got these meetings stacked up that my boss now thinks that I have extra time to do. But we're just talking about 10 minutes of exercise a day. It's a valuable tool in fighting a stagnant lifestyle. So if you're somebody that doesn't work out, and Eileen, I know you and I are people that work out like every day. So that's part of our lives. And I'm not saying, hey, we're better than other people. I'm just saying we've made that a priority. I'm suggesting to people that aren't doing it right now that just take 10 minutes. Just start with 10 minutes. Find something that gets you moving. And then maybe you up it to 30 minutes. Maybe you up it to an hour. Maybe you don't. But at least you're doing something. And then connect with others. We talked about this a second ago about the shared experience. Even if you're masked up or if you want to make sure everybody's vaccinated, that human connection beyond a virtual call or a meeting is so important. You need to find a ritual that's important to you also and then maybe share it. So you want to make sure that you're having that human connection. And we've talked about returning to office to a degree. And you're talking about dealing with clients, on site and that sort of thing. I feel like I get energy from it. I want to be safe, and we need to make sure that we have the proper protocols and safe, but that are safe. But I want to make sure that people understand how vital that is. So on the ritual that's important to you, it's something like a hobby. It's unrelated to what you do for a living. It's reading a book. It's doing crafts. It's playing, a sport, or it's an instrument or whatever it is, but it's something that you can do that doesn't relate to your day-to-day professional life, that allows you joy and allows you to have value in your life. And it's just for you. It doesn't, you can obviously do things with your family. Eileen, we're both very family oriented. So we like to spend time with our families, but there's also something that's just for you. So that's important. And finally, accept that this new normal, the new normal, well, it's abnormal. There's really nothing normal about it. So signs are pointing in that direction. If the sooner you come to terms with this, the sooner you may feel comfortably uncomfortable, if you know what I mean. Because everybody said when COVID started, oh, wait till we return to normal. And then as we've gone 9 months, a year and a half, everybody is realizing now, oh, we're not going back to what we knew on the very beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
We're just not going to. And if you embrace that and you understand that you're going to leave a comfort zone of a sort, and you've been forced out of that comfort zone because of COVID for a year and a half, that you're not going back, there's also opportunity for real development.
Oh, yeah. And that's an energy shift too, when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think of all that mental effort that you put into resisting versus accepting, embracing, as you put it, right? That's a pretty cool thing, I think, for leaders, again, to model. And I know lots of them have over the last 18 months, but people may have different expectations. Maybe they'll be coming back to physical offices, at least maybe even just in a hybrid capacity for the next year. But if they're expecting that the places are going to look the same and that people are going to act the same and everything will be what it was, that comfort that they had before, they're going to have a lot of trouble, and they'll expend a lot of wasted energy and effort on resistance. So that energy shift, that mind shift is another thing leaders can really think heard about and intentionally about, and craft a plan for how they can model the behavior of acceptance. And I think that would be really a powerful thing that they can do. You mentioned rituals. I'm curious, before I talk about, because you asked some approaches that I've adopted myself, is there any new ritual that you've added this year, Rob, to kind of the mix that's helped you? I'm just curious if you've tried something new and different.
I think I have, I've had things I've done for years that were part of what I did, but what I've tried to do, and I read a lot, and I like to read a lot, but we're always on our phones, right? I can read everything I want to on my phone, and I'm really trying to be mindful now of reading a book. And we're going to get into it a little bit later, but you mentioned as we were doing research for this podcast that you liked Atomic Habits by James Clear. And so I said, oh, I want to read that. And so I went and got it. And there's other books people have recommended here and there. So what I've tried to do is get physical books. I don't want it on a Kindle, or I don't want it on a computer, an iPad, this or that. I just want the old experience of just reading a book, taking a book, putting it under my arm and going to a room and reading it. And I may have my phone in my pocket, but I'm not sitting there on my phone. And even though listen, we do a lot of research on our computers and our phone and everything, but I just wanted to do something that would be an interest, be interesting to me. And I said it shouldn't relate to work. Some of it may be a little bit related to work, or about the things that I might employ that may help me. So it's not all about sort of self-help. Atomic Habits is terrific in that regard, but it may be just another book about, networking. It might be, different thing. So that's what I've done recently to try to start a new ritual.
That's a great tip. Yeah.
That is, kind of unrelated to the day-to-day, facing my phone, buried at work, returning emails, that sort of thing. How about you?
And there's been a lot of research that backs up what you're saying, that meaning the reading of a physical book versus listening to an audiobook or looking at a Kindle version or whatever, digital version you've got.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of research about that recently, on the differences in your brain, and the positive calming effects of just reading words on an actual page. And it's so interesting that that's the case, but it seems it's actually true. And I have to say, reading non-books, obviously I'm an avid reader, and Atomic Habits and other books like that are part of my life consistently.
Sure.
But in the hour before bed, I read fiction and nothing else. And it can't be terribly gripping, the book, types of books that I can't put down. I save those for the weekend or vacation. But right before bed, I'm always reading fiction. And again, this is one of the, 2 months, 3 months of consistently starting to feel better. This is one of the things that I have done. Good. So, everybody's going to find other things that work for them. But if there's one, if listeners want to pick up and try a few of these, I'm flagging that's one of mine. I also mentioned at the top that I found a number of approaches that are working for me. So, and you said, we're both avid exercisers. Well, exercise is definitely one of the things that's been working for me. I was always an avid runner, and I had stopped about 2 years ago, a little more than that. I'd stopped running entirely due to a pretty serious injury. But then even as I recovered physically, the languishing that emerged during, COVID and the pandemic that we've talked about before, it really took over my brain. And I don't know why, but I didn't have the energy or interest in running. And it was a huge struggle to get back on track consistently. Huge struggle. I stopped and started a number of times. But I guess I didn't give up. And the way that I didn't give up was I adopted the mentality of, even if it's a mile, even if it's the shittiest mile I've ever run in my life, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it at that same time of day that I normally would exercise and had when I was so, consistent and much more fit. Right. And now that I have been running regularly again, it's more than 3 months, consistently, at least, 3 days a week, and doing like weight training and yoga, a couple times a week.
Yeah.
I totally feel like a new person. And it didn't happen overnight. It was, initially it was like maybe 2 days a week and 1 mile. And it just, you kind of build and build and build. But the thing is I just had to stop beating myself up. Like, you suck because you're not doing it the way you used to.
Well, can I make an observation?
Sure.
Because I know you well.
Yeah.
When you were dealing with your foot issue and you couldn't do it, you talked about it not being able to do it all the time. It really bothered you. It did. No, but I mean, it's just part of your personality, right? And not doing that. There's such a great value in doing it when you weren't doing it. And we could all see why you weren't doing it, because you had like a boot on or something. And it was like, oh no, she can't do that. But it really got to you. And then I notice on Facebook that you'll post several times a week, hey, just finished 5 mile run, and it's you sweaty after you did your run. And I think it's really reinforces, but it reinforces for you the importance of doing it. And now that you're doing it again, when you say, hey, I'm feeling much better, even if you didn't tell this story that you just told, I would know that as your friend, because I can see when you didn't have it in your life, how it impacted you, and you talked about it because it was important to you. And now that you have it again, and you can start running those longer distances and getting that really good workout in, you're like, okay, just did this at 6 a.m. and boy, it feels great. That has value for you. So that's cool.
I'm a firm believer too. So this is, again, I like, this show is going to be real tip oriented. Anybody can be a runner, even if you hate it. And it is free. It is the easiest thing. You can walk outside your own front doorstep and start to learn how to run without any equipment other than the shoes. If anybody, is really thinking, I just need something that I can start, try running. I didn't run. I couldn't run. Never had in my life, like 15 years ago. I've run 7 marathons. You just have to think, I'm going to try something, and this might stick. It's because it's not easy physically, but it's easy in terms of no barriers. So
of course. And it's, and you said, hey, go run a mile. And if you struggle, you ran the mile. We were talking about Rob, do 10 minutes of an activity, just go do something.
Yeah. When I first started running, I couldn't run 2 blocks. I mean, let's be real here. This is total honesty here, listeners. So struggle is a good thing. I think learning to overcome things that are hard just makes you mentally stronger. And really at its essence, that is what we are talking about here. Mental strength, right? And business leaders bear a huge burden, as do employees every day. But when you're running a company and you're responsible for hundreds of people or thousands of people, it really feels like a lot. So, modeling, again, I'm going to get back to that. I really think businesses and organizations, leaders just need to model things like exercise as a way of life, and enable all the folks who work in their organizations to access movement at work more.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a healthier way of living. And right now, it's essential because we're all in a pretty tough place. So these are changes that we can make and communicate within our organizations as we try to improve and adjust and settle into this new world. Another piece to this emotional puzzle is admitting that you're overwhelmed. You just, you might be. It was really hard for me to admit that. Again, I'm a high productivity, achievement, goal focused individual. To admit to myself that what I was feeling was actually overwhelm, and that because I constantly kept saying, "Suck it up, Eileen. Come on, we got shit to do. Come on, right?"
Yep.
No, finally, I was like, "No, there's something wrong," and to change, you got to change, right? And I wasn't changing. I was just going at the problem the same old way. So admitting that you're overwhelmed to yourself, you don't have to say it outside to other people if you're not comfortable with that, but at least internally, letting yourself know that, feel that is a big step. So in a recent article, I read this on the Every Girl. I love the Every Girl. There were some terrific pointers that could help all of us, I think. And I want to share them here. But these are intended to help us alleviate the stress and anxiety aspects of life, right? And I'll read through the list and then we can talk about them, anything that jumps out. The number one is, God, this is the stop playing the "I'm so busy" game. Whenever anyone asks you, "How are things?" How many times is the response, "Busy"? Right? It's almost become like busy's an emotion.
It's a default. And then all of a sudden, the more you repeat it, the more it becomes a thing. And you're like, "Oh gosh, I'm so busy." It's like, that's a default. I think it's a default. And I've done it before. Listen, I've been guilty of it. We've all been guilty of it. But you know what?
Yeah,
we're busy. Oh, I can't do this because I'm so busy. I just think it's a lame default. And
that's one take. Okay.
And I just think it gets in your way of being productive, because if all of a sudden you keep repeating it 5 times a day, like, "I'm so busy. I'm so busy." Then all of a sudden you're getting overwhelmed.
You're not really getting anywhere when you're busy either, right?
Amen. Yep. Right.
Yeah. Well, as a woman, and this has also been studied extensively, women, we tend to super overschedule our lives. And, as you kind of grow up, get older, and you enter all these different life stages, then all of a sudden you're responsible for scheduling, not just yourself, potentially a spouse, potentially children,
your kids,
potentially the parents you may be caring for, or other older adults who are family members and close to you. There's all these things that you just take on and you keep scheduling and scheduling. And to have an idle moment feels abnormal, right? So that's been going on for years, but now it's 1,000 times worse. So that's what I think Every Girl means by the "I'm so busy" game. Right.
I gotcha.
Yeah. Number 2, admit what you don't know. Stop trying to be the expert and I know, not literally I know everything, but I can handle that. Right. So I think there's a lot wrapped in there, but admit what you don't know and seek assistance. Those are big things. People just need to get more comfortable with saying, "I'm not going to be able to do that myself. I really need to go and get some outside supports," whatever they may be.
Yeah, and if you don't know something, and I see sometimes executives fall into this trap, or leaders, any kind of leader, they'll don't make up something because you want to look like you know something, even if you don't know if that's accurate. So it's okay to say, "I don't know." And if you don't want the "I don't know," you can say, let me research that. Let me look into that. I'll get back to you on that. And then you bring in somebody else who maybe can help with that. So I think people need to get away from, to your point, saying, "Oh, I can't show that I don't know something," because then I look vulnerable. You just look like a human being, and you don't have to say, "I don't know." You can say, "I'm going to look into that and I'll get back to you later in the day. Let me research that a little bit and get an answer to you." That's admitting what you don't know. And it's not saying "I don't know."
As a business owner, I know that having either team members or clients or other vendors who we work with, if they don't outright, if they try to kind of stonewall and act like they do know, or act like I'm working on that and punt, all that does is delay progress.
Absolutely.
All it does. And that there's nothing more infuriating for me as a business owner. It really. So just think about, you're not helping by not admitting what you don't know. What you have to do is say, let's find the resources to help us solve for that problem. I don't think I have them all myself, or something along those lines.
That's okay. That's okay.
Totally. I'm going to read a few more of these. Vent to a trusted colleague. We all know that's a thing to do. We should take advantage of that.
Also,
careful about it.
Yeah, it also speaks to what you talked about earlier, which is, being able to share things and that sort of thing. So venting to a trusted colleague means that you're talking about it with other people, and you go, "Hey, we have the shared experience."
Oh, for sure. Similarly, getting feedback from someone you don't normally work with, and that could be somebody even outside of your own company. I've got my own little posse of professionals, women who I used to work with in different organizations over the years, and I go to them with things to get their take on it all the time. It's a very, very healthy thing to do, and getting differing perspectives, particularly outside your organization, I think is smart.
Agree. I mean, people that obviously people that you don't work with, people that you trust who have a different perspective. Having that different perspective outside of your little, I'm 3 feet away from it, I can't see it, is very useful.
We've heard this a lot, but it's worth repeating right now. Stop saying yes to more. And this used to be something that women did a lot more than men. Now, I think everybody's doing it. And recognizing what's additive to your life, what's additive to your profession, what really is meaningful versus what's just giving away little pieces of yourself over and over and over. Maybe there are organizations you used to be really active in that don't really get you in a place that's any new or different from where you are now. Just change, just evaluate.
I want to just quickly give an anecdote on that one as it relates to my charitable work that I do. I'm currently on 4 boards, and
wow,
that's a lot. And I feel like I'm doing 2.5 of them well. So I said yes to one because it was like favoring this or that, but I'm not really doing anything meaningful. And I suspect in the next few months, I'm just going to say, you know what? I don't know that I'm adding anything very good to this organization. And so maybe I'll be down to 3, maybe I'll be down to 2. But for me, saying yes to more, and not just me, but all of us, it stretches you more thin. So if you're going to be stretched thinner, are you going to be known as the person that does a lot of work, but none of it well? Or are you going to be known as the person that's more hyper-focused, that is excellent at everything that you do?
Right. That's a great point. Next, there's figure out what's temporary and what's not. And from a leader's perspective, I think this is particularly important that you teach how to identify the temporary versus long-term. And when you're communicating, to make sure that you're positioning those things as either temporary or long-term. It makes a huge difference.
As the boss, give me one example.
So temporary is for us right now. We've had a lot of shifts because we've had folks on maternity or family leave, and we've had people dealing with long-term family illnesses. We've had some people just in a state of overwhelm that had to take little breaks. We've had to do a lot of shifting thus in terms of how work gets done and capacity, right? So I've had to be really understanding and helpful, and also making sure everyone gets that you're not going to be having to do this forever. It ends on this day. So we're asking a little more of you now, but things will go back down to a more typical structure and typical workflow in this, short period of time, be it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. So that, and reminding them of that, not just saying it at the onset, because, once they get into those new situations, it can feel pretty tough, but just having those supportive conversations that we're almost at the finish line. We're going to be back in a great place really soon. And what other resources can we think of to bring into this to make it easier? That kind of stuff. That's one example.
That's a good one.
And then finally, the last suggestion from the Every Girl piece is, and we've talked about this a lot, but well worth reinforcing. Take real breaks and explain why. So particularly as a leader, right? Here's a great example. Last Sunday, after having an awesome weekend, but it was super, super packed, minute to minute, really exhausting, but crazy fun with family. I realized I was completely spent. That was not a restful weekend.
Right.
It wasn't. It was great, but it was not restful, right? And I was not replenished in any way. And I'd had 3 consecutive weeks of really long, difficult days. So I was already at kind of a, bad state of depletion. So I made the decision on Sunday around 5:00. I sent around a message to our team that just said, I'm taking a personal day tomorrow. And here's why. There's a lot of things on the calendar tomorrow that really require me to work. You all have got everything, in really good order, but I'm not in the best, kind of physical and mental state. So I'm going to take a personal day so that I can come back and work with you, really well Tuesday through Friday. And I have to say, we had this incredibly productive week just because I took that day.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, because I believe that Monday we were supposed to, text or email or, do something probably related to this podcast. And we didn't talk, which is no big deal because we get caught up in our busy day-to-day lives. But then you told me, sorry, we didn't talk on Monday or today or earlier. I took a personal day. And I was thinking, well, you didn't have to tell me that. You just could have said, hey, things got away from me or whatever. But you purposely said to me on that Monday, I took a personal day. And so when we're sitting here looking at this particular item, I was like, I hope she doesn't mind me bringing this up. And then you brought it up. So I'm glad that you brought it up because it was very noticeable. And I think it showed great leadership and it showed great self-awareness. And it was like, hey, no big deal. We'll get to it on, Tuesday or whatever. I mean, no biggie. Sometimes you get caught up. We all get caught up.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to commend you for that, because even in our interpersonal dealings, you had said to me, and you didn't have to, I took a personal day today. I'm like, okay. But I think that shows leadership, and it shows certainly for somebody like me that works with you, but not, for you at the Harbinger Group. I think it shows the people that do work for you, hey, it's okay. The boss has a personal day. The boss is not immune to, the day in, day out stresses of life. And so I think that showed great leadership.
Thank you. I would love to see so many more folks, just do that. And to be all like, look at me. I wasn't. It was just, hey guys, I'm taking personally. Here's the deal.
No, exactly. Yeah. I want to just share a little bit more analysis on some of the numbers that we see as it relates to mental health and the toll that all of this is taking on Americans' mental health. This is from an ABC News report recently detailing from the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, the anxiety and depression numbers that fluctuated with a spike or decrease in overall COVID cases. This is probably going to come as no surprise to you. However, we want to talk about it nevertheless because it really backs it up. For instance, from August 20th to December 2020 to December 2020, there was a 13% increase nationwide in anxiety-related symptoms and a nearly 15% increase in depression-related symptoms. Conversely, as the COVID vaccine was rolled out from December 2020 to June of 2021, anxiety-related symptoms decreased by 27%. And depression-related symptoms fell by nearly 25%. So this study included more than 1.5 million adults. It took into account 19 different waves of COVID-19 to assess the symptoms with questionnaires and surveys. And the takeaway here, putting it in this nice box, is researchers said this study emphasized the need to make mental health resources readily and easily accessible during the pandemic. So I don't want you to just take these numbers and say, well, of course they went up because COVID got worse, or of course they got better because, we had the vaccine and all of a sudden it was like, we're going to return to more normal activities, both personal and professional, come the summertime. And so the numbers went down. The point is that mental health resources. Mental health is an issue for the workforce in this day and age. And you need to do more than just ask, hey, are you doing okay? You need to ask, is there anything I can do? Is there any service that the company can provide you? And hopefully that a lot of companies do provide this, where you can talk to somebody, where you can have those services available, which will help you be a better worker. Because again, this is unprecedented. There was no how-to book. You couldn't get, COVID-19 for dummies. You couldn't go get that book and read it because there was no book. There was no template. And the bosses that understand that mental health is a thing are going to have a far more mentally healthy workforce and a productive workforce, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And furthermore, the leaders who share their own stories of struggle, as much as they're comfortable, that's just going to help people understand that it's okay to look inside yourself, seek the help that you need, recognize the signs for what they are, and turn the ship around when you can before, things get really, really dark for you. I just, the more that leaders do that, and that's, subtly, I guess, maybe subconsciously, that's one of the reasons why I told my team I'd taken the personal day. And I'm committing to continuing to do that, whenever I either need it, but making sure that they understand, here's why I'm doing it, and encouraging them to do the same, because I just want people to feel okay about taking care of themselves. And mental health it's intrinsic to physical health. Everything that happens in terms of brain chemistry associated with the toll of anxiety and depression in particular is evident. So it gets worse and worse and worse the more sustained you're in that state of being. And you can start to be, your immunity system gets severely suppressed. You can get very serious diseases, all kinds of things, right? So leaders just, I want to see more of us taking care of ourselves, talking about how we are, and encouraging the people who work with us and for us to do the same.
But it takes the boss. It takes the boss saying, I'm taking a personal day. That's a small gesture, a small activity that happens. And certainly you go beyond that, but setting those things for everybody else to say, hey, it happens to us all, as I mentioned earlier, is very powerful.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with that. Maybe there's another way to look at this too. Yes, I would say most organizations have things like employee assistance programs. And, often, you kind of get referred to that by people when they notice things are getting tough. And that's great. But we're all in this state of overwhelm and anxiousness to some degree now. Really, we are. The world is that way. So again, as we think about what's our new hybrid, work structure and communication going to be, well, it doesn't matter what it's going to be. You, leader, should be acknowledging, I'm not coming back to the same people I had before all this.
That's such a good point.
How can I help them? It's not just the physical spaces we're returning to. We're not returning to the same people. We've all been deeply affected by this. So how can we help our folks get the support they need to be able to handle, this new normal? And that's more than just referring them to your employee assistance program.
Of course, that was my point I was making earlier. It's more than just that.
Yeah, and so here's something that it's not that hard to do. I think if employers would consider, it's not such a big deal if your people want to take their therapy session during their workday, or at some point in the like lunch hour, some point in the afternoon, right? Something like that is what I'm talking about. Because, gosh, if they could do that and know that they're not going to be judged for doing their telehealth therapy session from a quiet space, private space inside of their company, or just if they're working virtually from home, that's given grace, right? That's telling people, signaling, take care of yourself, and we want you to, and you need to. There's an example. And as we tie this back to the work again, we need to discuss an important state of feeling that has emerged during COVID, which I've mentioned on a show or two before, and I mentioned it a little earlier. Languishing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a serious thing. And there have been lots of articles. Just try Googling languishing New York Times, and you don't even finish the second word before it pops up. It's right. That article was so popular earlier this year. It's been talked about because it's a real thing. Adam Grant's piece in the New York Times, it was a column, and he described languishing as the state between flourishing and burnout. Now that's a wide range, right?
It is.
But when you're flourishing, he said, you feel fulfilled, energetic, and eager to take on challenges at work. Yeah, it's been a long time since I really felt that on a sustained basis. I'm starting to again, though. I'm real happy to say. But when you're in it, he went on to say, when you're burned out, you feel exhausted, overwhelmed, drained, right? When you're languishing, you feel a lack of meaning and a desire to fit in emotionally. So how do you go from languishing to flourishing? That's a great question.
It is a great question.
There was a piece that we found in the Harvard Business Review that had a couple tips. So I'll just share them. I think they're good advice for folks. One is to set boundaries. And that's important, really, just in all kinds of ways. I mean, I've seen things creeping in more and more and more. The person I work physically most closest to is my spouse. And we used to have this ritual where we would walk every single morning for like 90 minutes. And that was like the largest chunk of time we'd spend alone together on any given day. And that has just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk because lots of his clients are on the East Coast. Others are in Europe. So now they're never uninterrupted. Well, shouldn't say never, but infrequently they're uninterrupted, spans of time. So, setting boundaries, and it's not enough to just, turn off the notification. It's like advocating for yourself by saying, I'm not available before 8:30 a.m. Because, it's going to be better for your state, diminishing your state of anxiousness. If that whole like attachment to the phone and constant checking and things like that, that's it's terrible for people. We all just need to recognize that.
And I think good bosses do recognize that, but not everybody's a good boss.
Yeah. And what's funny is sometimes you have multiple bosses and they'll have different, particularly when you're in like an agency client service environment.
Sure.
So you have to advocate for yourself in those situations. That's, you just have to, have frank conversations up front with clients, like what's acceptable to them, what's acceptable for us, find your, happy in the middle place, and work from there. But it's about respect and boundaries and not just acting like, well, I have no choice no matter. Of course you do. Of course you do. People stand up for yourself and have a healthy conversation.
Well, and that's the point, Eileen, because you need to set those boundaries, because when you're working with everybody, you need to do it's, the 9 to 5. And we talked about this a couple of podcasts ago. This whole idea of 9 to 5 is really gone. And it's how do people work? Some people might say, oh my gosh, I'm not available from 4 to 6 because I'm picking my kids up from activities and getting them, dinner fed, that sort of thing. And then, maybe I'm good from 7 to 9, whatever the case is. It's so it's different. So setting those boundaries, if somebody asks, or if you feel like you need to advocate for yourself and say, you know what, I'm not available before 8:30 because what has value in my life for me, working out, releasing those endorphins, really getting, mentally and physically set for the entire day. And people will have different things of that nature. And that's why the setting the boundaries is so key.
Absolutely. But no one's going to set them for you. You have to set them for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the real truth here, people. I mean, yeah, I just see so many folks who they become victims of their own existence. That's just it's not going to fly. You're not going to be healthy and happy.
You're going to get the Overwhelm Hangover. We should do a podcast on that. Oh, wait, we are.
Wait, we are. All right, let's see. Then there's 2 more things here from HBR, which, everybody should do this at least twice a year. But right now in particular, reflect on your path. Like, what is the path you're on right now? How do you define success for yourself? That's super important. And what's your mission? If like, what mission are you on for you in your career, in your family life, personal interests, all those things? Just take that time because it reminds you that you're a multi-dimensional being. And honestly, no one's going to give you an award for working yourself to death. Like, that's just the truth.
They quit handing those out long ago.
Actually,
they never handed those out. I don't believe they ever handed them out. From a micro standpoint too, Eileen, you're talking about the sort of macro about like, hey, take that time to really assess what you're going on, your path. So you have to believe that you're on the right path. And sometimes the path, what's your definition of success? And what is your mission? Sometimes it's small victories. Sometimes it's like you had a good week and you're like, you know what? We've had some rough weeks. We had a good week. I'm going to celebrate this. I'm going to know that I'm on the right path because of this. But also part of your path and maybe part of your mission doesn't always relate to success. Being on a path, sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes it's, I tried this out. I believe it's the right thing to do, and I'm going to go pursue it. Now, if it ends up not being the right path, then you will get off that path. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you have to also enjoy the journey. And I know that sounds like sort of, I don't want it to sound trite, but success is how you define it, but also understanding that, I haven't made any mistakes. I've just had life experiences. I've had different things. So I think I think from a micro standpoint, that's important to think of it in that way too.
You're 100% right. Particularly right now, people should be setting smaller goals, mm-hmm. putting far less pressure on themselves and modeling that this small goal is a victory.
Yes.
Behavior, modeling that to, folks around them, whether you're a CEO and your inner team people, or the whole department that you manage. Just think about that. Smaller accomplishments right now they'll build confidence, and they'll build mental strength, and people will just be able to handle more, little by little. Mm-hmm. My mission for myself, there was a period not long ago, a month or so ago, where my little mission was I was going to get some kind of meal on the table for my two, older teenagers by 5:30 every day, whether they ate it or not. But I was going to do it because it was important to me that they knew that, I'm there, I'm providing nourishment, I'm providing, emotional support, dedicating time where they have nothing. I have nothing else to do. They have nothing else to do but put food in their mouth, and they can, either listen to my blathering or just tune me out, but we're together. Doesn't matter. Right. And I managed to do it like 4 days out of 5 on weekdays. And that was a huge victory.
Pretty good. That's a huge victory.
Like in over 3 weeks, it actually made this difference. We all started to kind of feel a little better. Mm-hmm. And there was a flow in the household, and I don't know, it was a good thing. That's just one example, of a smaller mission to set for yourself.
Sure.
And to build on your smaller successes. Right. Yeah. There's one other perspective that I'd really like to offer here as we kind of wind down the show. I have always believed that taking measures to organize yourself helps you, handle like whatever the world throws at you. And I don't mean Marie Kondoing your closet. That's totally not what I mean. I just mean using tools that help you get perspective on all the things that are in front of you that need to happen. And that list just seems to build and build and build.
Sure it does.
Lately, in the last 18 months in particular. Also, we have so much less time for the doing because there's so much time spent in these stupid Zoom meetings where work isn't really getting done most of the time. Let's be honest. I'm of the fewer meetings mentality myself.
I subscribe to that one too.
Totally. So this is about what I'm about to talk about. It's about learning to determine what is truly urgent and important. It's life-changing, and it can help you get out of this loop of overwhelm. So let's talk about a tool that I've heard from it just so many circles over the years, and it's come up again because you're reading Atomic Habits, and I've been listening to the Audible audiobook version of Atomic Habits again, and that tool is called the Eisenhower box. So, for those of us who were asleep in history, Dwight Eisenhower was an incredibly productive human being, believe it or not. We know him because he was a 2-term U.S. president. He was a 5-star general. This guy definitely knew a thing or two about prioritizing and just getting things done.
Sure was.
So he used this tool that I'm about to describe, and thus it is named for him. But first, I want to share one quote from him that I love. So take this one with you. What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. Right? Don't you love quotes that are just so simple but totally true?
I have to tell you, even if you were asleep in your history class or your civics class, you probably still knew a little bit about Dwight Eisenhower.
I really
He's
do.
one of those legendary historical people, that's for sure.
Yeah. Recently, we had a discussion in our house about, is Cincinnati a state? So let's just not talk about falling asleep in school. Anyway, okay. So the tool has 4 components. I'm going to go through them with you real quick. So first component, urgent and important. It's like a box. Think of a box on your piece of paper. Okay. So the first quadrant is urgent and important. And that means tasks you must do right away, not the kind of things someone else on your team can handle.
It's on you.
Yep. Yeah. Second category is important, but not urgent. So tasks that you schedule in the future to get done and that involve you and your time. Third is urgent, but not important. Typically, some of those tasks you can delegate to other folks. And when we say, but not important, maybe another way to look at that is it's not essential to your role on your team or your function, but it's something that really needs to get done. And you need to find the person who's the better person to make it their urgent and important. Right.
So the box is what's happening, from a self-assessment standpoint, but it would be important to get it done, and it'd be important to have somebody else do it who felt like it was important to get done. So I think that's important to,
or it's important to their function. Feelings we're going to leave out of this because, everybody brings a different bag of feelings to work.
Of course.
But anyway. Number 4 is this quadrant is neither urgent nor important to you. And that means you're going to eliminate it. So if it's a distraction, whether it's, hey, this might be a club you're in where you've got a meeting twice a month and it is not additive and it is totally coming off your list, right? Yep. It's really worth going through the exercise of identifying the things that are being pushed at you as this has to happen and using this lens. I use it regularly. It can help you see the forest for the trees. It totally does for me. I'm able to see where should I dedicate my time when I ask these questions of myself every day. I ask them every week on the kind of longer term perspective. And when I set planning for the month and for the quarter, this is the basic tool that I always whip out, and it's my lens for evaluating.
And it also relates to what we talked about earlier, which is saying yes to less.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are just, so many opportunities where you can find another person on the team who is better suited to do that task just as well and maybe more efficiently. Right. So that you can free up your time to do the really important things. Like, just imagine if I was responding to every email or doing scheduling of meetings, and I can go on and name 1,000 things. Sure. I would never be writing strategic plans for clients. I wouldn't be able to do new business development to keep, our firm growing and thriving. Right. That's just one example, but you can apply that to any position and any person. Right.
Of course.
Yeah. So I'll tell you where you can get more information about that real quick. So we mentioned James Clear and Atomic Habits. He talks about it at length in his book. And there's a worksheet that you can get without even buying his book. And you just have to go to jamesclear.com/Eisenhower-box. And you can have a template to download for
You can
free.
even see the book because I have my little
It's the greatest book.
filter on, but this is the book, actually.
I hope he knows I am one of his major fangirls.
Well, if he doesn't now,
I doubt
he will now. He will now.
Yeah, I am nothing to James Clear.
No, that's
Someday.
good. Hey, listen, it really is a good book, and beyond the Eisenhower box, it really offers some great kind of personal growth moments. The subtitle is Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results, and he really gives some great advice. So I would highly recommend it too, since you're the one that said, hey, you know what you ought to look at? Atomic Habits.
Oh, yeah. I will just preview one of our next episodes that will be coming up not long from now.
Yes.
Which will be Rob and I share our greatest tools and resources that we learned from in 2021.
Yes.
And of course, I will be talking at length about Atomic Habits. It's mine, Rob. You can't have it.
I can't
it's
have
on my list.
Can I do an aside here or there? Can I say, oh, you didn't like chapter 12?
No, you can't even jump in.
About chapter 12.
No.
Well, that is for a future episode, kind of our year-end review coming up in December. But for now, that's going to do it for another episode of Can You Hear Me? I'm Rob Johnson, president of Rob Johnson Communications.
And I'm Eileen Rochford, CEO of the Harbinger Group. We thank you for joining us today, and we really hope that you'll join us next time as well. You can listen to us anywhere you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more.